The year is 1816, and it's a time when the Industrial Revolution was reshaping society. Steamboats were becoming a common sight on rivers, and the telegraph was still a decade away from invention. This was a world where news traveled at the speed of a horse, and the concept of climate change was as foreign as the idea of a man walking on the moon. The political landscape at the time was equally transformative. The United States, still a fledgling nation, was just starting to flex its muscles on the world stage. Europe, on the other hand, was trying to restore order after the upheaval caused by the Napoleonic Wars. These were times of great change and uncertainty, when nations were being built and borders redrawn. In the midst of this, the common man was primarily concerned with the land and the yield it could produce. At the time, farming was not just a profession, but a way of life, a rhythm dictated by the changing seasons. It was still by far the largest employer in the region. Now, as we all know, nature has a way of reminding us of its unpredictability. The world was about to experience one of those reminders. Unknown to the people alive at this time, a volcano half a world away had erupted a year earlier. Mount Tambora, situated in present-day Indonesia, had unleashed an immense amount of volcanic ash into the atmosphere. Carried by wind currents, this ash spread across the globe, blocking sunlight and causing temperatures to drop. This was a climate abnormality, a deviation from the expected weather patterns. These can be caused by various factors, ranging from solar radiation fluctuations to volcanic eruptions. The effects can be widespread and devastating, altering ecosystems and disrupting food production, while causing severe weather events. These reverberations were about to become all too apparent. Our stage was set for what would become historically known as the year without a summer, or morbidly coined, the 1800 and froze to death. As winter thawed into spring, little seemed amiss. Farmers were preparing their fields for planting as they had done for generations. With the earth warming under the gentle caress of the spring sun, seeds were sown with hope for a bountiful harvest. Meanwhile, meteorologists studied the skies, noting the usual signs of the changing seasons. The spring air was crisp and fresh, filled with the scent of new growth and the promise of summer. The trees budded, the flowers bloomed, and the fields turned a vibrant green. The farmers looked forward to the warmer months, to the long days of tending their crops under the sun. Yet, as the days grew longer, subtle signs began to hint that this year might not be so typical after all. The temperatures seemed cooler than usual, the nights were chillier. The wind carried a biting cool breeze, and the sun seemed less warm, less bright. Farmers noted the slower growth of their crops and the lack of vigor in the young plants. Weather people, too, observed the unusual patterns, the persistent adverse temperatures, and the lack of the usual heat spikes. These were small signs, easy to dismiss as mere quirks of nature. After all, weather is unpredictable, and every year brings its unique blend of sun and rain, heat and cold. But as spring faded into summer, these anomalies would prove to be harbingers of a season like no other. June arrived, and with it an unseasonal frost. From the vast plains of North America to the rolling hills of Europe, the northern hemisphere found itself gripped in an icy embrace, a cold that would last June, July, and even up until August. The mercury dropped and the summer sun seemed to never gain its trademarked warmth. This chill was not just general discomfort and nuisance, but a deadly adversary. It was the enemy of every farmer, every crop, every mouth waiting to be fed. Fields that should have been lush with grains and fruits were instead barren and bleak. The ground, stubbornly frozen, refused to yield its yearly critical bounty. Crops failed en masse, leading to widespread food shortages. In the blink of an eye, the promise of summer turned into a nightmare of a second winter. The days were cold, the nights colder. Skies, instead of being a clear summer blue, were a constant, ominous gray. The rivers and lakes, which should have been teeming with life, lay still, frozen in time. People tried to cope and to adapt, but the cold was relentless and the food was scarce. Markets that should have been bustling with the season's harvest were eerily quiet and barren. The usual laughter and chatter of the warm weather was replaced by a grim sadness. It was a silence that spoke of empty stomachs and uncertain futures. The effects of this unusual cold were not limited to the lands themselves. Seas and oceans, too, were affected. Icebergs were seen further south than ever before. Ships, the lifelines of trade and commerce, found their usual seasonal routes blocked by the icy invaders. The economies, already strained by the Napoleonic Wars, were hit once more, this time by Mother Nature herself. And so the summer passed, not with the usual warmth, but with a chill that would be remembered for generations. The effects of this freezing summer were both immediate and devastating. Plummeting temperatures having its catastrophic impact on agriculture also facilitated widespread outbreaks of disease. Cholera and typhus spread across regions, taking a heavy death toll on already weakened populations. But the impact would extend far beyond its immediate aftermath of that year's crop failures and pandemics. Scientists started to dive deeper into the mysteries of the Earth's atmosphere, trying to unravel the complex interplay of factors that lead to such drastic climate shifts. They started to understand the role of volcanic activities in altering global temperatures, a concept previously unexplored in the early years of the scientific method. These discoveries, not just academic achievements, but also lent valuable lessons that helped societies prepare for future climate-related challenges. Now let's bring this scenario into the 21st century. Our planet has evolved from a period known as the Little Ice Age to a rapidly changing and extreme climate. Today we're more interconnected than ever, and our continued reliance on sensitive systems like agriculture and infrastructure is immense. A sudden drop in temperature, akin to the year without a summer, would have significant and far-reaching implications. Firstly, our mentioned global food supply chain would be severely disrupted. In 1816, the crop failures led to widespread famine, and sadly, we're not just talking about a single region or hemisphere at a time. A climate event of this magnitude could potentially impact the entire world today as well, leading to food shortages or soaring inflation on a global scale. Let's not forget the social and health impacts. Increased disease outbreaks, mental health crises, and social unrest would all be potential outcomes. But this isn't about painting a doomsday scenario. It's about understanding the potential consequences of significant climate events and the importance of being prepared in an increasingly wild world. The year without a summer should be a wake-up call, a stark reminder of nature's unpredictable power. Today, armed with this knowledge, we have the power to plan, prepare, and hopefully mitigate some of the potential damage.